Hi all, welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from the Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Today, we talk about Coolmore's Star Editions with Tom Moore. We talk about breeders' bonuses and sales statistics. In racing, the reset of the Rosehill vote and a change in the pattern, as well as the importance of memberships. While in wagering, where is the New South Wales government at when it comes to its Tabcorp review? Tim, welcome. But we're going to get straight into our other topics in a minute. We're going to go straight into our feature interview this week with Coolmore's Tom Moore. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Bren. Hey, Tim. How you going?
Thanks, Tom.
Really, really well. We'll get Tim. I'll give you the new ball, mate. Off you go.
Well, Tom, yesterday on Wednesday, you announced that Switzerland had been retired. Probably no surprise. He was always going to go to stud this year, but you decided to not take him to the Royal Ascot like you did Home Affairs and send him straight to stud.
Yeah, he's done enough to earn his place on the roster at the fee that we've set him at and be a really popular horse for us. We've set him at $55,000 plus GST. The way he won that Coolmore Stud Stakes in the spring really stamped himself as one of the best 3-year-olds in the country. And there's no 3-year-old that's run a better rating than what he did in the Coolmore. He was dominant that day. He was a high-class 2-year-old winning the Todman Stakes at his third start. He's got a great pedigree. He's got a great physique that is going to lend itself to a wide variety of mares throughout Australia. So for us, he'd done enough to stand him at that fee and attract quality mares from the best breeders. So why not get him back and show him off and let him settle into his new surroundings?
I guess going back to the start of his spring campaign in the run to the Rose, there's a lot of obviously coming off the slippery. He did have some bone chips removed, I believe, and maybe that was a little bit of a setback. But once Chris got him right, the Roman Consul and obviously the Coolmore was there for everyone to see. He was electric.
Yeah, he was perhaps ridden a little bit upside down that day. First up as a spring 3-year-old, but bounced back after a little bit of a freshen up and really displayed what we knew he was capable of in the Roman Consul. And then went from that dominant win, skipping the Everest, which was discussed at the time. And I'm sure if he put his best foot forward in the Everest, he would have been competitive as well. Those formula lines were backed up when he beat Growing Empire in the Coolmore. Growing Empire was competitive in an Everest, and he was dominant that day. So to win the Roman Consul and Coolmore double is something that was done by a horse such as Zoostar, and Switzerland really stamped himself as one of Snitzel's best sons that day.
Obviously, he'll be the third son of Snitzel on the roster, and Tom Magner told us at the Easter sale that you never have too much of a good thing. I think they stood 8 sons of Galileo at one stage on the Coolmore roster. But for those that haven't seen Shinzo and Best of Bordeaux, how does Switzerland sort of stack up physically alongside particularly Shinzo, slipper winner?
Well, he's a $1.5 million yearling, and when you look at him, he is what he was on the racetrack, which is a very fast horse, and he's a fast-looking horse, a fast-looking son of Snitzel. They very rarely make $1.5 million in the sale ring. There's only a couple every year that do that. He was a standout at the sales. He's going to be a standout in the Stallion Barn when he gets back. But they're 3 very different types of horses physically. All good-looking horses in their own right, but they will all they're all suit a different sort of mare and a different sort of breeder. But when we eventually get him back into the Stallion Barn, he's currently at Mount White. But when he eventually comes home to the barn and we start showing him off to clients, people are going to absolutely love him.
Obviously, you talk about international pedigrees. You've got Switzerland out of a Canadian bred mare. Coolmore are famous for bringing that, I guess, into hemisphere, bloodlines back and forth, and obviously, with that in mind, talk to us about City of Troy, in champion son of Justify. He'll be front and centre of your roster this season. What can Australian breeders expect from this horse?
Well, firstly, we're just extremely lucky to have him. He's a horse that is going to be remembered and spoken about for a long time in Europe. He's one of the best horses of this century. To go out and smash them in a Dewhurst and every run at 2 and then come back and be a champion 3-year-old is something that is very rare. He won the Derby easily, and then they all tried to beat him in the Eclipse and the Juddmonte International, and they just couldn't get past him. But he's got a great pedigree. The shuttle stallions are having a little bit of a renaissance at the moment, and there's very few shuttle stallions that have come out with credentials that are better than City of Choice.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the recent success of shuttle stallions. Justified his own side being one of them. Wheaton Bassett's obviously had a really strong start in Australia, and you guys backed him in. There's obviously others across other farms like Too Darn Hot that have had great runs lately. Australian breeders tend to be a little bit cynical in probably the last 15, 20 years about some of these international stallions coming in or not. But is there a bit of a feeling at the moment that that's been put to one side, and there's this really enthusiasm for new horses and new blood coming to the Australian market, and that the Australian breeders are really keen to support these stallions?
Yeah, well, it happens all the time in the industry. There are certain trends that people take hold of, and at the moment, shuttle stallions such as City of Troy are in vogue. Too Darn Hot's done a great job. He's had a significant fee increase this year, and justifiably so. Wooten Bassett has 2 of the best 2-year-old colts in the country already this season, and continues to go from strength to strength. Even a horse like Harry Angel is doing a good job, and it's probably justified a fee increase. And we saw yearlings by a horse like St. Mark's Basilica be extremely well received in the marketplace this year. So the market is getting behind them, and it's justifiably so, and breeders are starting to get behind them in droves as well. So when we announced a horse like City of Troy at a fee of 45,000, people were very quick to jump on board, and you can see why. He's got all the credentials of a top class sire for the future, and we've seen videos of him. I've seen him in the flesh up in Ireland. He's a particularly good looking horse, medium size, elements of both Justify and Galileo, being out of a Galileo mare, Group 1 winning 2-year-old. So no Danehill in his pedigree. It all makes sense. Like, we're not the only ones that are bringing out these high class outcross stallions to mix with the amount of Danehill blood and other dominant sire lines within the broodmare population in Australia. So it's not a coincidence that this is working. We've all been trying to do it, and the person or the stud that gets the right one is going to be significantly rewarded over the next 20 years.
All right, Tom, collidely, I guess, on home affairs, it's the start of your run of Colts syndicate success, I guess, and his first yearlings are on the sales rings, and we've seen the high profile ones, obviously the Sunlight filly making 3.2 at Magic Millions, and the Shout the Bar colt making 3 million at Easter last week. You must be pleased with the way that you support of him's been justified, I guess, in the sales ring, or supported by your clients and owners and trainers.
Yeah, well, we retired him to start at a fee of 100,000. So naturally, he's going to attract a high quality group of mares, and we supported him ourselves with some of our best mares. You look at the Sunlight filly at Magic Millions, made 3.2 million, and the Shout the Bar colt, as you mentioned, at Easter, topping the sale at 3 million. I think only one time in history has a stallion in Australia achieved 2 $3 million yearlings in a season, the other being Redute's Choice. So he's in pretty elite company there. And every trainer in Australia seemed to want to buy them. It's for good reason. He was dominant in the Coolmore. He came back and beat Nature Strip in a Lightning, being the first 3-year-old to win a Lightning since Fastnet Rock before him. He's the best and fastest son of I'm Invincible. So he's got everything you want in a stallion prospect, but they have to go and do it and produce the types that the market desires, and he's obviously done that. So he was the most popular stallion in Australia last year in terms of numbers covered. He's covered good numbers all the way through. He's a very fertile horse, but he's attracted high quality mares all the way through. So they've gone into all the best stables. Over $31 million worth of yearlings by him were traded in the market this year, which is phenomenal. I would be very surprised if another first season sire ever even got close to that. So yeah, we couldn't be happy with the way he's been perceived in the market with his first crop yearling. So we just look forward to seeing them go through the process now. We've got a number of our own being broken in and put into training. So I think we'll know very early on with him.
On another stallion, I know he's not shuttling to Coolmore, Australia, so to speak, but he's going to Windsor Park in New Zealand. That's August Roden, which Coolmore's had a long and great association with Windsor Park and Rodney Schick and the family. I know when they announced him, I think they had 70 to 80 mares booked in that day. He's, very well credentialed son of Deep Impact coming down under as well.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Like he wouldn't be out of place on the roster here at Coolmore, Australia. But it so happens that we want to put all of our energy into City of Troy, and we're better to stand a horse with the credentials of August Road than Windsor Park. He's a regally bred horse, 6-time Group 1 winner. He's priced very fairly over there. And we just feel like he's a perfect horse for New Zealand breeders to really hone in on. We've had luck in the past huge amount of luck in the past with supporting Windsor Park with these high-class stallion prospects. And August Roden is right up there with the best of them, including High Chaparral in years gone by.
Tom, thanks so much for your time. All the best for the season and best of luck with these new stallions.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks, Tom Moore, there for his time. Tim, we're seeing the Swagger starts now announce their fees. Arrowfield early in the week. Not really surprised there, I suppose. There's been a few others. We're probably expecting a couple more next week as well. Has there been anything that sort of surprised you about where the service fees are sort of are landing this year?
So far, I guess those high-profile stallions, I guess Arrowfield's I guess what surprised me perhaps is Snitzel. He had his hugely successful sales season, particularly at Easter. He's rising 23. They could have put his fee up for the sake, not for the sake of it, but they could have put him up to 250 plus, alongside the Zoo Star last year, or even, 300 sort of up with Extreme Choice, I guess. They could have done that, but they've kept him at 247,500, where he's been the last couple of years, I think. So I guess that's just maybe rewarding their clients that, we're not going to jam him the last couple of years of his 2 or 3 seasons of his stud career, or perhaps his last one. Who knows? And then, they've kept the Autumn Sun at the same fee that he was going to stand at last year. So, even despite he's going to lose that momentum with 1 year off, but I guess they're backing him in that he's going to be popular enough, and he certainly will with the way he's going, particularly with his fillies and the way they're training on.
It's interesting, Mum. We'll move on now to the review of the VOBIS scheme, which was announced this week, which is interesting. You spoke to a few breeders earlier this week, just sort of around, and a few key people within the breeding industry around about these bonus schemes. And they are really a massive asset for the Australian industry, Tim, aren't they, in terms of adding confidence and, the ability for people to reinvest and, get reward for the success that they have from a breeder's perspective. First of all, sort of, talk to us a bit more about that, but also about, what are we expecting out of this VOBIS review? I mean, obviously all schemes the breeder schemes are working well, as I mentioned, but there is a sense here that things can probably work even better from a breeder's perspective.
Well, I guess from VOBIS' point of view, that's long probably been held as, I think it's the original one, and Victorians might argue it was the best, but there's $30 million flying around in that, bonus ecosystem, and it's not all just cash. There's vouchers for reinvestment. I guess from a breeder's perspective, and I did speak to Peter Murray, the president of TBV, that the cost of breeding a horse, and obviously as we know, owning a horse is incredibly expensive too, but breeding a horse, it costs you about $40,000 now, not including service fee, to get that foal to a yearling sale. And if you're supporting a VOBIS or Victorian stallion and breeding a Victorian horse, and you win a good race, you're not getting that much back from the bonus scheme. I guess some people, there's probably been people going, you know what, I'm not going to spend I'm not going to invest in the nomination fee to nominate for VOBIS, and I guess that's part of the problem. They need it as many Victorian-born foals nominated for the scheme as possible to make it pay for itself. So that's where they're at, and I guess that's why Rosehill and Victoria are looking at how they can better encourage, first foals to be nominated, and then people to support the scheme by buying Victorian horses. And as I wrote in our newsletter earlier this week on Tuesday, Bren, that I think stallion power has a lot to do with that. Yes, there's a bonus scheme, but if the horses aren't there that you desire as an owner, that's just a sideline. It is a bonus, so to speak. It's not the main reason you would go and buy a horse. Having said that, West Speed Platinum in WA is incredibly popular, sort of an insular sale, as we say, in breed and industry where they do support their own, incredibly loyal. And if you do get a good WA horse racing against their own effectively, it's incredibly lucrative, up to sort of 70,000-80,000 for a Saturday. And that's why that scheme works particularly well. Cutis is the same in Queensland. It's just Victoria competing against the New South Wales horses, whether they can make it better, whether that's more back to the breeder or the owners a bit in. I think the review's welcomed and I support that, and to see where it ends up.
Just a quick mention now to some stats we put out earlier this week around about where the yearling sales market's at the moment. And you spoke about Victorian VOBIS. We spoke about a bit about there, and obviously the Victorian investment's quite interesting. It is down significantly year on year, about $30 million or about 17% across the yearling market. Now, that can depend on a few different factors. As I said, buyer location stats aren't always exact, but it is worth sort of pointing out that there's something going on there in Victoria at the moment, and we're not just talking about the fact that Yulong probably were less active than they probably have been in the past, and the Rosemont Colts Alliance didn't sort of get together this year. It does seem to be a little bit softening in the market in Victoria, which is interesting as well. Queensland also down a little bit. Look, where the growth came in the Australian market this year, or actually there wasn't necessarily growth, but where the strength was in the market in terms of the buying bench was the international buying bench, and that went up significantly across the year. That made a big difference, made a huge difference to Easter. We talk about the big buyers, in Australia and how they're making some of the big buyers internationally were the ones that key Hong Kong, in New Zealand, like, places like that making a big difference. So yeah, the stats are up there. You can always have a look at that during the week. The English Chairman sale is just 3 weeks away, and the catalogue is now available online. Among those catalogued for the sale include 64 stakes horses or stakes producers, 18 pregnant mares on their first or second cover, 76 fillies and mares aged 10 or younger, and 26 mares that are free of Danehill blood. An extraordinary group of high-class fillies and mares are on offer, including 4-time Group 1 winner and the Everest Victor Bella Nipotina, Group 1 star Amelia's Jewel, the beautifully bred Group 2 winning and Group 1 place 3-year-old Two Darn Lizzie, the record-breaking mare I Am Mare, Group 1 winners Royal Merchant and Kofo Sun, as well as many, many others. There are also the dams of top-class horses like Group 1 Caulfield Guineas winners Golden Mile and Griff, an exciting 2-year-old group winning 2-year-old field of play. The Chairman's sale will be held at Riverside Stable just on the evening of Thursday, May 8th from 5 p.m. Go to english.com.au to check out the catalogue. Okay, Tim, let's move on to the racing world, and obviously the big news out this week. Look, we spoke about this privately earlier in the week. There wasn't much going on with the Rosehill vote when it was supposed to be scheduled, for I think May 12th or whatever it was. It's now been pushed back to May 27th. I guess this story sort of rolls on where that sits, what that means. People are probably hoping that this will provide a bit of a final result or final sort of cap on, the debate around Rosehill. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this debate will go on for a while yet, no matter which side sort of gets their argument across the line. But it is an interesting point about sort of where this is at and sort of how prolonged this whole process has been.
After we published that story and revealed that that's what's happening, they've moved the date. I did receive an interesting email, maybe I'm not as cynical as I thought I was compared to some of the industry participants, who noted that May 27th is the same day as the race fillies session at the Magic Millions, which is for breeding industry hugely important. A lot of valuable mares, Zougotcha, make millions of that day. So some of those members that are industry participants will be tied up that day. Said, I'm not as cynical to suggest they do it deliberately, but it was noted that there is a clash there. I guess you can vote through proxies anyway. So I'm sure those breeders will have their say directly in industry participants.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess we'll just have to find out how this plays out. I think there's a few other bits and pieces coming out of this story over the next couple of weeks before the vote goes ahead. Quick mention to a change in the pattern. Move from the Melbourne Racing Club, the Rupert Clark and 1,000 Guineas pretty much revert to their original dates from a couple of years ago. The CF4 to November is an interesting one, Tim. I think this is a good initiative because I think this creates a sense of that final Group 1 of the Melbourne Spring being somewhat of a grand final. You might get 3-year-olds coming back or horses coming back, 4-year-olds coming back, or the Golden Eagle back to 1,400 metres. It does seem to make sense from a structure point of view, and having the Ore and Futurity so close together in the autumn didn't really make a lot of sense either. So I think the MRC and the Race of Victoria probably got this one right. Albeit, was get a little bit nervous when they start messing around significantly with the structure of the pattern, but probably just going back to probably was the common sense result a couple of years ago.
Absolutely agree with that sentiment, Bren. I guess you got to give RV some credit, and I think Matt Welsh was in the chair at that stage, that they wanted to push into November, and they've moved the CF4 there to, obviously the betting turnover suggests that, and crowds I think suggests that having a feature race day then does work. And so I think they've found the right balance. Didn't really quite work with the 1,000 Guineas, I didn't think, albeit it gave a different group of fillies to come through and, aim at a Group 1. But I think the structure at this stage, unless proven otherwise, is, kudos to MRC and RV for doing that.
And I also just want to highlight a story which is going up today around club membership. So, a really interesting sort of time in Australian racing history. A lot of focus around what's going on at clubs, obviously with the Rosehill debate with the ATC, but also with the MRC, what's gone on the last sort of 6-7 months. The VRC, some challenges there. Warwick Barr's done a yarn about the importance of club members. I guess financially, how they're nowhere near as important as they once were, but how politically they're really important to clubs. So worth a read there. The other thing I want to point out, Tim, we've got a special edition of Straight Talk coming up hopefully early next week involving an exclusive interview with Chris Waller. Matt Stewart spoke to Chris, who pretty much spoke to him for 25 minutes about the pressures of living up to the expectations of being Chris Waller. It's a really fascinating discussion. We're just pulling it together at the moment and hope to have it out to you Monday or Tuesday next week. But I just wanted to highlight that as well. On now to our Darley stat of the week. Here's a quick look at Animo. His first 2 books reflect his champion status. In those first 2 seasons, he's covered 19 Group 1 winners, 82 Group winners, 127 stakes winners, and 186 black type performers. But it doesn't stop there. He's also covered the dams of 18 Group 1 winners, 42 Group winners, and 57 stakes winners. And to top it off, Godolphin is sending 40 of their best mares. Safe to say, Animo is an easy choice this season. All right, Tim, we'll round off as we often do with our discussion around wagering. And there's a lot going on in the wagering industry at the moment. Every time I pick up my phone, there's another person texting me about what's going on here or there. There's rumours going around about people taking over such and such and whatever else. We'll stay clear of them at the moment while we get a bit of clarity around what's actually going on in that space. But I did want to mention an article that went up yesterday, which is a bit of a nothing's happening article, but significant that is nothing is happening. 10 months ago, the New South Wales Treasurer, Daniel Mookie, came out and spoke about the review of the Tabcorp deal. Tabcorp had asked New South Wales government to review their funding deal in New South Wales in order to get them onto a sort of level, what they call level playing field. It's basically a similar deal to what they were able to achieve in Queensland, probably more so like Victoria, I suppose. Tabcorp have highlighted New South Wales as being a troublesome area of their business. Sort of the lion's share of $1 billion write down of their business was from New South Wales last year, and they really want to redo that deal in order to sort of, I guess, change the way things are. That may involve them paying a significant amount of money up front to sort of buy out of that deal, which doesn't expire to 2033. Their overall license doesn't actually expire to 2097. So these are long-term deals they're looking to renegotiate. So there's a bit going on in that space. But actually not much going on from a government perspective. Radio silence, pretty much. Coupled up with this, Tabcorp have never, just to make it clear, Tabcorp don't want the potty consumption tax to go up to 20%, but the New South Wales government have sort of moved to that may be the case. They may consider that, and that's pretty much what happened in Victoria, where it went from 10 to 15% on the basis that the Tabcorp deal had finished and supposedly put everyone on a level playing field. The Victorian deal has been, a good little bonus for Tabcorp. So, what is interesting is this: the discussion around Rosehill, which is sort of driven by the concept that wagering is driven that decision. And I pointed out this out several times over the last few months. I don't know how you can make a decision on Rosehill without knowing what the future funding environment looks like in New South Wales. It makes it, because TAB is directly related to club funding, so it's different from Victoria. So it's an interesting decision that the members have to make, not knowing exactly, the amount of money that's been coming in, how that's going to change and how the funding structure is going to change. So all these things are important for racing, aren't they, Tim? It's really important the racing gets its head around its funding structures, because the argument or the discussion that we've had several times across the last few months is that actually money-wise, racing's got plenty of money coming in. It's not a crisis. This wagering downturn is only going back to where we were pre-COVID. What wagering turnover, or racing wagering turnover, is still up 60% on what it was 10, 15 years ago. So that's not the long-term trend's not there. The challenge is probably just making sure they've got the systems in place to make sure the funding's working properly.
Is from a government perspective, maybe there is things going on in the New South Wales government, but is tackling gambling or anything to do with gambling, as we've seen on the federal level, is it just too hard and it's too controversial that no matter what deal they reach with Tabcorp, the anti-gamblers or voters will just like, no, it's you supporting gambling. Is that where it's at, do you think, or is more at play?
I think it's a really complex review. So we've got two bits of legislation in there, with there's other things that they know if they change something here. And I guess the other thing too, Tim, if I'm really honest, if you're the New South Wales government and all the political storm that's erupted over Rosehill, you're probably keen to stay away from racing at the moment. There's not a lot of votes in them trying to resolve this. It will make a big difference to the industry if they get this right, and it will change the way that they're funding it. So I think it's important stuff. But in a world where they've sort of got their hand bitten off about Rosehill, I can understand why they might be a little bit gun shy when it comes to reform in this space. So we'll watch the space. Interesting. Something may happen, but the June state budget coming up. But I'm probably hearing at this stage it's all quiet on the Western Front. We might be unlikely, a bit like the federal government pushing those reforms down the path. It might be a little while before we hear anything on that. All right, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you, of course, by our great sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, and be sure to subscribe, whether it be Apple, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, all the various places you can find us. A little shout out again towards the end of the thing to our good mates, Bren and Julio, who had a great success with their horse winning the Sydney Cup on Saturday. Congratulations to them. They were very hospitable with their company the week before last, Tim. I think there might have been a bit of a party on Doncaster Avenue last week.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next week.